Unblocked game websites, you know what they are. They're pretty much the highlight of free time at schools everywhere, considering most schools would let them fly under the radar yet wipe cool math games off the face of the earth. While not as popular as they once were, these websites are still floating around to this day. Although, nobody really knows who makes these kinds of sites, or rather what they'd even put on them. I would know, as I managed to come across a really strange website like these called Game-333. The website seemed like your standard, run-of-the-mill, unblocked games website. It had everything you would expect: run, awesome tanks, etc. However, there was something I didn't expect: an entire section dedicated to Flash games. I was puzzled running into this, seeing as how Adobe Flash had died almost 2 years ago. I skimmed through the games it had to offer, playing a few games I remembered from my childhood. One thing I noticed was that some of the backgrounds for some games were faded in color, almost stormy looking. There was one game in particular I wanted to revisit, as I remembered playing it countless times as a kid, but I never got the chance to finish it, that game being Gumball, Schoolhouse Rush. The premise of the game is simple: Gumball and Darwin are told to fix a leak in the school by Principal Brown, to which Gumball accepts, as he believes it'll be his chance to impress Penny. Upon starting the game, the happy-go-lucky title screen music began to play. I closed my eyes and imagined all the times I had played this game way back when. I clicked the play button, and the game started. It was here I realized that this game wasn't an emulated version of an old Flash game, but rather a full-on remake of the original. The game started with an animated cutscene of Gumball and Darwin walking through the hallways without a care in the world. That is until Principal Brown stops them in their tracks, urgently in need of their help.
Gumball. Darwin. There you guys are. Listen, I need your help. The school is, well, flooded. So I need the both of you to go check on Miss Simeon, save the students trapped underwater, and more importantly fix the leak. Could you two do that for me?
Gumball, upon hearing this, thinks about it before realizing something.
This is my chance to impress Penny. We'll do it, Principal Brown.
And with that, the two race off, ending the cutscene. The first level in the game took place in the school's hallways. A tutorial played before the level started, with NIEs explaining the controls of the game. The level was just how I remembered it: collecting sun stickers, avoiding obstacles, and using Darwin to break through boxes and get a higher jump boost. Everything seemed fine up until the end, where I reached the door to Miss Simeon's classroom. Gumball just froze in place before I could even enter. No matter how many times I messed with the controls, he wouldn't budge. I was just beginning to wonder if the game was broken, until I saw the lights begin to flicker, and everything went dim. A silhouette similar to Gumball's appeared at the red end of the hallway. Strangely enough, Darwin seemed to notice this as his pupils shrunk. The shadow smiled, before walking towards Darwin, who screamed and ran off. Gumball didn't even seem fazed by the whole ordeal, as he just stood there, happy as can be. After this occurrence, I could finally control Gumball and finish the level. At the end of each level, there's a boss you have to defeat to continue on to the next stage. From what I remember, the first boss involved Miss Simeon throwing detention slips at several students, and you had to hide behind them in order not to get detention yourself. Here, the boss fight was titled, "Think About What You Did." I was given another small tutorial, except Anais wasn't there. A small bit of text appeared in her place which read, "Stand there. Think about the people you took the lives of." When the boss fight, if you could call it that, started, I was in Miss Simeon's classroom, with nobody there except for Gumball. All I could do was make Gumball move to the left and right of the classroom, and it stayed like this for what seemed like several seconds. Over time, the screen began to slowly darken before fading to black completely, leading to another cutscene. Gumball was just standing there, up until he heard a voice call his name. The camera slowly panned to show who spoke to him. It was Anais, who looked downright horrible. She had deep gashes all over her body, and a chunk of her head looked like it was bitten off completely, leaving a few bits and pieces of her brain visible. She asked Gumball a simple question.
Why?
She lifted up something, that being Daisy. Anais pulled a string on the back of her, leading to blood-curdling screams emanating from the doll. Gumball stared at them in complete horror as the screams continued. The cutscene ended there. The next level was the flooded portion of the school, and Anais was gone from the tutorial. The only thing I was able to use in this level was my mouse, which was used to make Gumball swim through the level. Normally, Darwin was supposed to follow Gumball around throughout the game, either breaking boxes or helping him get up to higher places. For the entirety of the level, he was completely absent, leaving me to try and attempt to finish it on my own. Surprisingly, I had managed to get halfway through before shit hit the fan again. The music slowly began to get more distorted, and that weird shadow Gumball from earlier appeared out of nowhere, following me throughout the rest of the level, which caused this portion of the game to be rather difficult to complete. I eventually managed to beat it in the end, leading me to the second boss fight, this time being called, You Know What You Did. Like earlier, Anais was gone from the tutorial, with the only directions being, drown in your actions. The boss fight had me stuck in one portion of the flooded school, nothing else happened much like before, and I could do nothing but swim around what little space I had for what felt like minutes on end. Eventually, another cutscene began with Gumball swimming through the water, looking bored out of his mind but still worried. Suddenly, he looked up and noticed something that made him swim to the bottom in fear. Darwin's waterlogged corpse slowly began to descend towards Gumball, with the cutscene ending as it reached out to fin towards him. At long last, I finally made it to the third and final level, that being the neighborhood. Everything was coded in monochromatic colors, with the only exceptions being the game's HUD and Gumball himself. A deep rumbling noise was the only thing that could be heard in the background, and all I could do was make Gumball slowly move forward. The neighborhood seemed to stretch on for miles, and I began to notice that Gumball got increasingly more worried as the walk continued. By the time I had reached the end of the level, he looked terrified out of his mind, staring at something in the distance. The screen panned over to reveal Gumball's house, with that damned cat he's had to deal with throughout the game standing on the porch. Yet another cutscene played, and Gumball stood face to face with the clone that had been tormenting him for a while. He yelled at the thing, asking it a simple question, one both of fear and anger.
What do you want from me?
The figure didn't respond, and began to peel off its flesh. Sounds of skin and bone ripping and cracking apart flooded my speakers. Gumball's pupils shrunk, beginning to slowly look upwards. The background slowly faded to black as the screen cut back to Gumball, only this time, he was almost unbearable to look at. Its head resembled a rotted and deformed skull, with the rest of its body being covered in a dark substance. It slowly pointed at Gumball, releasing a horrid, inhuman screech. Two more figures emerged from the darkness, those being Darwin and Anai, being extremely deformed and twisted themselves. Almost immediately, I was dragged into the third and final minigame, the title being a single word in all caps, Run. Gumball's sprite had changed. Now shaking and fearing for his life, I slammed my finger into my left arrow key and watched as Gumball fled in pure terror, the figure not too far behind him. It wasn't long before his siblings joined in on the chase. My god, were they terrifying to look at. Anais's limbs had been stretched out, and her hands were deformed and seemed to end in sharp points. Her ears drooped over her back, and she had the widest smile I had ever seen, filled with rows upon rows of deformed, jagged teeth. Darwin fared no better. He had the same elongated arms and legs as Anais, except they looked nearly dislocated, and his mouth and eyes were nothing more than misplaced hollow voids where they should have been. I ran all the way back to the start of the level, which now had platforming sections to add more of a challenge, I presume. You barely had any time to prepare for your next jump, as all three of those abominations would be hot on your tail if you waited too long, so you had to act fast during these parts. Eventually, I finally made it back to the school, bringing me to something I didn't expect. One final level, titled, Face the Consequences. Anais returned for the level's tutorial, looking more deformed than she had in the previous level, the only instructions for the level being, atone for your sins. I was in the school, where I had first started the game. It looked nearly abandoned. The walls were decayed, cobwebs and grime covered nearly every crevice of the walls, and several trophy cases were broken and had their achievements taken out of them. Gumball sorrowfully walked through the deserted hall, eventually coming across a dead end. Gumball turned around as the sound of rapid footsteps could be heard getting closer and closer. He didn't become fearful, nor did he even scream. He just stood there and silently accepted his fate. His siblings had finally caught up, violently lunging at him, which ended the game and gave me one last thing to look at. The end screen for the game was a photo of Gumball's body after he had been mauled. His head had been brutally smashed open beyond recognition, and his blood was smeared all over the surrounding walls, some of it even covering his clothing. There was no option to play again. All I could do was stare at the results of the poor feline's actions. I closed the tab right then and there, wanting no part of this shit anymore. A few weeks later, I decided to head back to the website to see if it was still standing out of sheer curiosity. I'll just get the obvious out of the way, as I know that's what you're thinking. The site has completely vanished. I don't know when, how, or why, but it's gone. And honestly, I'm glad it did. God only knows how many things like that were lurking in the corners of that forsaken webpage.